Hello, welcome to the weekly meeting of what was once called the Knights of the Round Table. We'll probably have to call it the rectangular glass table today. But whatever it is, we're meeting again to talk about sports. I'm Buddy Martin, along with Tom Schmitz to my left, to my right, Tom James. And fellas, this week we're going to talk about injuries. One of those things that you hear a lot about, the bugaboos. A lot of excuses are made about injuries, but there's a real problem with the injuries this year, unlike anything I can ever recall. So we'll get up to that in a minute. Tom, I know you got some thoughts about that and some of the teams that are really saddled with injuries in a big way.
In a huge way, there's some injuries. And we look at the SEC, there's really some serious injuries in the SEC. Auburn, Florida, both with 13 injuries apiece to starters throughout the season. At one time during the season, Auburn and Florida both had 13 starters that missed playing time. But you look at the ACC, Florida State, a perennial powerhouse, they've had 15 starters that have gone out this year.
So we'll get into that in just a minute, a little more depth. And Tom James joins us once again. And I know if he has any injuries to talk about, it's probably about a team in the West Coast called Southern Cal, playing better football. But you know what? It does seem that no matter where you look, Big Ten, what conference, there are a lot more guys hurt. Tom James, you agree with that?
There's no question about it. The Big Ten's been saddled with several injuries to high-quality players this past week especially. And as we talked about in the SEC right now, there's at least 6 preseason all-SEC players that have missed considerable time throughout the season. We've got the big quarterback losses right now with Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Trevor Knight obviously going to be out for the rest of the regular season, at least Chad Kelly as well. Some running backs, Petway at Auburn, who is hurt. So a lot of these injuries are really going to affect the way the SEC turns out down the stretch.
And we'll break that down in just a minute.
Sure.
But first, other things to talk about this week. I know we like to talk about coaches on the proverbial hot seat. I don't know. Is it a made-up term? I mean, people are in and out of the doghouse. You know, politicians sometimes get voted out, impeached. Coaches get fired. And we in the media love to say, oh, he's on the hot seat. Why? Because we said so? There were some people, however, that were flagged as potential hot seat people. One of them at Baton Rouge is gone. So I ask you, Tom Schmitz, looking back at it now, in our previous discussions on the round, square, oblong, rectangular table we've had here, we discussed some coaches at the beginning of the year who might be in trouble. Trace that through the season and what's happened.
First off, you're never going to get this table discussion right, are you? You know what kind of table it is.
It's a glass table, Tom. I can see it.
It changes weekly.
It does change weekly. You know, we identified earlier this season, but in the preseason on Southern Pigskin tonight, with the Knights at the Round Table, coaches we thought were on the hot seat. And one of them that I thought was squarely on the hot seat was Gus Malzahn at Auburn. I thought the way Auburn had played over the last 2 years, the way Alabama had distanced itself from Auburn in the West, and the way the Iron Bowl had, in the last 3 years, becoming an irrelevant football game, really, to the national scene, I thought Gus Malzahn was squarely on the hot seat. Not so much anymore with the way Auburn's turned their season around.
And, by the way, in the game he played against LSU, we said loser walks. And guess what? It wasn't Gus Malzahn. It was Les Miles who was fired. Of course, you have that. So
seconds away from being fired, Gus Malzahn, though, was.
Awfully close, walking up to the edge of the cliff but not falling over.
Yeah, you got a guy out in California, your favorite team at USC. He was in trouble, and now he's looked upon possibly as maybe a coach of the year at the Pac-12.
It's quite possible. Clay Helton out at USC after that Alabama loss, 52-6 in the season
Not
opener.
So
We
bad
all
as it turns out right
well,
now.
you know what? That just proves how much a quarterback can change your life. They have a new quarterback, Sam Darnold, who started after USC's early 3 losses, and since then they've won 6 in a row, including the huge one over Washington this past weekend. So Clay Helton now looking like he is firmly planted as a solid coach out at USC. And, of course, you talked about the SEC guys. Kevin Sumlin is another one at Texas A&M who was on the hot seat.
And
Things have gotten a lot better. They've gotten a lot better at Texas A&M, but, of course, a quarterback now is out, so we'll see how that
Well,
that
he's
plays
back
out.
on the hot seat.
He's back on the hot seat. But
He probably won't get fired, but he very well maybe have to fire some assistant coaches. So
true. And Kentucky. And
if you lose your headset, you get fired, by the way.
Well, that's okay. We'll give you a break on
Not
that.
when the company's called Buddy Martin Media, by the way, just so you know.
So look, I remember just a couple of weeks ago, Gator fans were so upset with Jim McElwain and his offense, they were even talking about insurrection, about maybe overthrowing McElwain and kicking him out and bringing an offensive coach. These fans are fickle, man. Look, I mean, we in the media, we contribute to that. We're the ones who keep saying, that's terrible. That guy ought to be run out of town. Look, I mean, coaches are hard to come by.
Yeah.
Look at USC. Tough time finding somebody. Look around the league at different people. Tennessee had to dig deep before they finally found somebody. And now even Butch Jones is back on the hot seat sometimes. So
it has gone back and forth.
Yeah, Butch Jones is up and down whether he's on the hot seat or not. He's on the hot seat, the warm seat, the hot seat, the warm seat. So, the guy we're not talking about, though, who's not on a hot seat, he's trying to get a seat. Ed Orgeron at LSU, guy who coached at USC. He's been the guy that's been the interim guy.
Yeah.
Ole Miss, he had a terrible time at Ole Miss, but other than that, he's been the interim guy, kind of a rah-rah guy. And now there's some question whether if he beats Florida, that he may secure the LSU job this weekend beating Florida.
Well, we had 2 reports on that on our radio program on the Buddy Martin Show, where we've had people on who said, no, Jimbo Fisher's the guy. Other people said, no, Jimbo Fisher's not going to leave Florida State. Ed Orgeron, he's Louisiana, he'd be the perfect guy. So I'm not sure how that stands right now, Tom James.
A lot of back-channel discussions, of course, always going on, that stuff that we just don't know about. Ed Orgeron did a great job as the interim guy at USC, but ultimately did not get the full-time position there. Now he is at LSU and has taken over and has had good results other than the Alabama game, but you sort of give him a pass for that. His defense played pretty well in that game. Being a Louisiana guy, I think he ought to get the job there. He's proved it.
Well, there are a lot of people who agree with you about that. So Tom James, Tom Schmitz, Buddy Martin, talking about guys on the hot seat. Is it real? Something we made up? Well, there is a thing called getting fired.
Yeah.
And so before you get fired, it gets a little warm.
Yes.
So let's just say maybe there is something like a hot seat. Today's roundtable discussion right here among Tom James, Tom Schmitz, Buddy Martin. Also, injuries. You hate to hear a coach talk about a bad season and blame it on injuries. That's one of the biggest crutches anybody could ever have. Yeah. I think coaches have skated on it for a long time. I'm one of those guys when somebody says, well, we had a lot of injuries. Guess what? It's football. People get hurt. You got to play through the injuries. However, it's a little bit different this year when you look at the Florida Gators, who have lost 8 starters. 8. And by the way, not just 8 starters, but some of their best players, already having lost their 2 leading tacklers, Alex Angelo and Gerard Davis. Now Marcus May's gone. And we go on and on and on right down to offensive linemen. C.C. Jefferson comes back this week. But, I mean, you just don't hear of a team losing 8 starters to injury. So I present that as Exhibit A. What's going on with college football?
Well, they've had
getting all these injuries.
Well, Florida's had 13 starters miss at least one game this year. Auburn's had 13 starters miss at least one game. Florida State's had 15 starters miss at least one game. Alabama's had 7 starters miss at least one game. I attribute it to lack of conditioning. And when I say lack of conditioning, I'm from the old school. I think if you go half speed or 3/4 speed during the week in practice, and then you get in the SEC or the ACC or one of the other Power 5 conferences where it's bigger, faster, stronger guys, and now they're going full speed, but they practice at half speed, it's very hard to go full speed on Saturday when you practice at half speed all week. And if you don't go at full speed, you get hurt. And that, I think that I'm going the other way. People think that that you need to do less hitting. I think you need to go more, 100%.
All right, I vehemently disagree with everything he just said.
That's
of all,
not been the first
athletes
time.
are more conditioned, better conditioned than they've ever been. I guarantee you that. Maybe there's another word besides conditioning. You might say your body has to get football ready. You got to be able to take shots, and you how it is early in the year your body gets in football shape. I think it's a difference in conditioning there, and I don't think they should hit every week. I think it's one of the problems. Tom James, what do you think?
I happen to look at this rash of injuries that we're maybe seeing this year as a complete coincidence, really, because it flies in the face of everything that we are seeing in terms of the direction of the game of football in this modern era. The game of football is getting softer. you're not allowed to hit as hard. You're not allowed to hit in the same ways. The players are protected more than they used to be. I don't know if there is a bigger reason as to why there are more injuries this year. I tend to think it's more of a coincidence this year.
Did you take physics in high school?
I did not. I
didn't
never
either,
got that far.
I didn't either, but I can figure this out. A bigger object, stronger and harder, traveling faster, does more damage.
Yes, it does.
Players are bigger, stronger, faster. The collisions are enormous. Bodies are not built to take that.
Yeah. I will say, buddy, I give credit to teams that can keep winning when you have all these injuries like the Gators have had. I give the coaches a lot of credit for that and their recruiting, because they're clearly recruiting strong, too deep, that they're guys who are the next guys up that have to walk in the game at a given moment at the drop of a hat can play just as well as the starters can play. I give the coaches, Coach McElwain, a lot of credit for that.
And Tom, you talked about toughest conditioning earlier.
Right.
You played for one of the toughest guys, Irk Russell, when he coached the defense at Georgia, and of course at Georgia Southern, is a tough, hard-nosed guy.
Wow.
How did he treat
That's
his
an understatement.
players? Did you guys hit every day?
Every day.
Yep.
No wonder
He
you're
sat
so
up.
screwed up in
He
your
sat
head.
up in the
I
tower.
know there's some
And
reason.
Tommy Spangler, the defense coordinator at Georgia Southern, if you didn't want to hit, they had a soccer field you could play on. Is how Tommy Spangler looked at it. So it was you hit, but it was a different day back then.
Sure.
I mean, hitting was what you did. I mean, concussions weren't thought of the way they're thought of now. So there wasn't as much liability, or they didn't look on it as much liability. I understand that, but I still think when you go half speed or three-quarter speed in practice, your mind does the same thing. Muscle memory does the same thing in games sometimes, and that can get you injured.
Let me just say one quick thing about my experience. I missed Bobby Winfield in a tackle in high school one day, the biggest, fastest, strongest guy we had. I kind of arm tackled him. The coach, Cobb, stopped practice, came over and said, "Line up here, Martin." And Winfield, run over him. 10 consecutive times I had to tackle Bobby Winfield. When I was done, I was finished with practice. I couldn't even practice. I was so beat up, and I was a 160-pound weakling. But, did that make me a better football player? Probably not.
Bet
But
you
I'll
didn't
tell
arm tackle
I
again.
I
Bet
didn't
you
miss
never
him
did that
anymore.
again.
Bet you didn't arm tackle him.
No, I didn't. Exactly.
And I'm guessing you never wound up on the soccer field at Georgia Southern.
There was no soccer in my future. No soccer.
For sure. Okay, that's today's edition of the Round Square Glass Table. On behalf of my broadcast partners, Tom Schmitz, Tom James, I'm Buddy Martin.